is gone today, and so I'm going to be sharing not from the book of Luke. Todd will finish that up in the next few weeks, but I'm going to be asking a question today. And that question is this: who do you work for? Now, I'm not asking the name of your boss, really, but I am kind of asking the name of it. But who do you work for? Who motivates you to work? What motivates you to work? We'll be in the book of Genesis, 3 verses, chapter 1, verses 26 through 28, if you want to go ahead and turn there. My wife, Charlotte, is a realtor. Many of you already know that. And so when she first got into real estate, she drugged me to this motivational seminar. They like to have these. They call them classes, but what it really is them pumping you up, telling you, here's what you need to do to generate more business so that you can make more money. Now, that's probably not fair to the business of real estate, but that's kind of what it felt like to me. And so as I was sitting there listening to this guy talk, he pulled up, he got this guy on the front row to stand up. And he was a young guy. He couldn't have been more than 20 to 23, 22, 23. He was young, and he was new in the business, obviously. And so he had him stand up. He goes, all right, I want you to picture with me this. I want you to picture that all of your bills are paid. You don't owe anybody any money. And you have an extra $2 million. Now, I don't know why he went to 2. I'd have been fine with 1. But if you have an extra $2 million, what would you do with it? And this guy, he went right to what he was saying. He goes, I'd buy a new house and a new car. And he starts naming all these things. Now, I don't know if you're young in here, this is not meant to be derogatory towards you. But I'm just going to tell you, as someone who's got a few miles on my tires, I need you to understand that those things maybe won't bring you all the ultimate happiness that you think they will if you fulfill those dreams. But that's okay. Go ahead and chase after them. It's good to have motivation. But I looked over at my wife who was sitting next to me, and she just had that look on her face, and she was just shaking her head. And I was like, okay, all right. I think I know the answer to this, but I looked at her and I said, what would you do if you had an extra $2 million? She didn't miss a beat. She said, I would buy a whole lot of uniforms for kids in Honduras that can't go to school unless they have a uniform. And I looked at her, and I'll never forget that moment, because I said, that'll wake you up in the morning. That'll get you out of bed to go to work, right? And so I ask you again, who are you working for? What are you passionate about? What wakes you up to go to work? What gets you excited about working? See, your job, I believe, should bring 3 things to you. Your job should have 3 things. Some combination, some balance of these 3 things should be in your work. The first one is this: there should be protection. What's that mean? You need to get paid enough to pay the bills. All right? So you should have a job. If you have a job that doesn't pay the bills, that's okay. You better have another one that does, right? You need something that's going to protect you in your job. So protection. There are people who work to make lots of money. There are people who work just to pay the bills. There are people who work just enough. That's fine, but you need protection. The second thing you need is, I believe, pleasure. I believe you need to enjoy what you do. Now, I know a lot of people who go to work and they love what they do. And I sadly know a lot of people who go to work and they just hate it. And that's sad to me. I don't know if you ever heard the phrase before, but love what you do and you'll never work another day in your life. You ever heard that? It's amazing if you can really tap into something and love it so much that you just can't wait to get up. And so pleasure. You need protection, you need pleasure. And the third thing you need is purpose. Your work should bring some purpose. There are people who work to fulfill a lofty purpose. They like to see that they're making a difference in the world, or at least in someone else's life. See, money can give you a sense of security. And enjoying your job can make you happy. And making a difference in someone else's life can motivate you. But I have a question. As we ask and answer the question, who do you work for? Is there a higher godly purpose for what you do? Now, some of you are in school, you go, I don't work yet. That's fine. You're on your way there. Some of you say, I'm done. I retired. I'm not doing anymore, right? Well, when I talk about work to you, what do you do every day? What are you doing with your life, even though you don't go to a job that provides those things I just talked about, all the things I just talked about? And is there a higher godly purpose to what you do? I attended a funeral this past week. It was actually the father of one of our members in Norman. And when we were sitting in the room, the room had incredible acoustics, and there was a guitar player, acoustic guitar player, and a cellist, and they were playing music. Now, you need to know this about me. I do not have any presets on my radio in my car to classical music. None. Zero. I don't own one. I don't have anything on my playlist at home that's classical music, right? But have you ever had that moment where you hear something that's out of your norm and it just grabs you? So I'm sitting there, I'm listening to this, and it's beautiful, and it's echoing through this chamber, and it's great, but it just kind of went in and out, because that's not my type of music, right? But then in the middle of the funeral, they played one song. And guys, I don't know what happened. But all of a sudden, I was captivated by this music. And I heard every note. I was asking myself questions. Now, I'm a musician too, a little bit. And so maybe it's from that, but I don't think it was. But I began to ask my question, why did the composer put that note next to that note? And I was starting to, I didn't cry, but I was getting very emotional as I was listening to this music. Have you ever had that moment? Have you ever had a moment where maybe you were looking at a painting or a photograph and you thought, I wonder what the artist or I wonder what the photographer was thinking when they took that? And you saw the creativity and you saw the beauty in how they formed. Have you ever been reading a book, watching a movie, a video, whatever it is? Have you ever been... You saw this incredible work, or you heard this incredible work, and you're like, wow. And I realize you're going to say it, and it's true. I was preparing to come talk to you about this today, but I literally sat there at that funeral, and I thought, wow, God, you created that composer, and you created those musicians to use their gifts and their talents to bring honor and represent you and the creativity that you have. And it was just an incredible moment for me. And as we look at this, I hope you understand that what you do, that your work is a worship to God. That what you do is a reflection of what you think about God. It's a response to what God has done for you. And it's a representation of who God is. Let me say that again. What you do, your work, is a reflection of what you think about God. It is a response to what God has done for you. And it is a representation of God's character, who He is. Some have been led to believe that work's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. We read Genesis 3 after they sinned and fell, and you see the curse, and you say, oh, well, they've sinned, and so now they have to work. I grew up believing that. But you need to understand that our text today in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 28, tells us that on the very first pages of the Bible, work was introduced. It's called the cultural mandate, which that's just what some people call it, but basically it's the mandate from God to work. Follow with me in verses 26 through 28. It says, then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Do you know why the Bible tells us that we're not supposed to make images of God? Because He already did. The reason that we're not supposed to make images that represent God is because God already did. He made you and me. He says, they will rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, the livestock, the whole earth, and the creatures that crawl on the earth. What's that mean? It means that we will manage the earth. We will manage the world. We are given the authority to be in charge of and rule the world. Verse 27. So God created man in His own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them male and female. And here's the best part. God blessed them, and God said to them. All right, so God blessed them so they could bless others. He blessed you so you could bless others. And He said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, that meant something different than what I'm talking about. All right? If your kid's little, you can explain it to it later, right? That meant something different. He made Adam and Eve be fruitful and multiply. That meant something else. I'm going to tell you what I think it means here in a minute. And subdue it. Rule the fish of the sea, the birds of the sky, and every creature that crawls on the earth. See, guys, we were created in the image of God to be image bearers of God, to reflect His glory, to represent His character, to let the world see who He is in us. That's a tough one. How much do people see who God is by the way you live your life? How much do people see the character and the nature of God by what you do, by your work? He says, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. See, I believe that He's telling us here to create. He's telling us in whatever you do, create. Some of you are really good at it. I'm looking at some people and I know you can take more than 2 pieces of wood. You can take a bunch of pieces of wood and you can make something out of it, right? I see some people in here that can take their hands and they can visit a patient, and you can create healing or help create healing with your hands. God says, be fruitful and multiply. Whatever it is you do, use it to glorify me. Make goodness in the world. Make godliness in the world. Your life and your work should show the creativity of the Creator who made you. But then He also says, subdue it. This term in the Hebrew, subdue and to rule, it has this king connotation. And I want you to start thinking, as we talk these next few minutes, about kings. I want you to start thinking about who the king is. Because I'm asking, right? Who are you working for? Who do you work for? We work for the king. Well, who's the king? The king is God. The king is Jesus. That's who we are supposed to be working for. But here He is. Here we're reading the very first page of the Bible is telling us that the king says, I created you to rule with me. I created you to do what you do so that you can move my purposes forward on the earth. I plan to rule and to reign the earth. We may think the world's out of control, but God's still in charge. You believe that? God's still on the throne, and He's expecting you and me to play our part. You will find some stories in the Bible that this isn't true, but I want you to look and start noticing how many stories in the Bible when God did something incredibly powerful, how many of those stories where God just did it versus God used a human to do it. Look at how many times God has used. God parted the Red Sea. Yeah, He used Moses. Every time almost you can see that God is using humans to help Him move the world and His purposes forward and His kingdom forward. Everything that we do, our words, our actions, our attitudes, our work, they're to represent His nature, His character, and His identity. So we're thinking about kingdom. We're thinking about kingdom. And so what I want to encourage you in this is to understand that it is your job to build His kingdom, not yours. So again, I ask you the question, who do you work for? Who do you work for? Are you so focused on building your own kingdom that you're having a hard time focusing on the kingdom that God is building, that He wants you to be a part of? Guys, you need to understand that your workplace is your mission field. And again, if you're retired or if you're in school and you're not there yet, it still applies to you as well. Where you go is your mission field. And this is maybe one of the most key things that I'm going to say all day. There are people in your life who will never come to faith in Jesus Christ. They will never step foot in this church until they come to faith in Jesus Christ. And the way we've been doing it is, let's get them to church and let the preacher lead them to Jesus. And those people are destined to live forever without God in hell because we've failed to realize that our mission field, our workplace is our mission field. Your school is your mission field. Your home, for some of you, is your mission field. Your trip to the store is your mission field. The way you behave when you drive is your mission field. Yeah, I got all of you on that one. Because I've seen how you drive. You have a higher purpose as the image of God to represent Him to others so that you can promote His kingdom. 1 Peter 2:9 says that, but you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for His possession, so that you may proclaim the praises of the one who called you out of darkness into His marvelous light. We are all a kingdom of priests. We are all representatives of God. It is our job. It is our job in our work to represent God to the world. J.R. Vassar is a pastor in Texas, and he was speaking at a conference I was at one time, and there was a bunch of pastors that were there, and these are the words he said. He goes, whatever God is going to do, He's going to do it through all the people, and we must equip our people to fulfill the mission in their greatest missional context. Where is that? It is at their workplace. There are 168 hours in a week, and most people only spend 1 to 3 hours at church. Yet we equip people for private personal growth, which is needed, and ministry inside the church, which is also needed. But they spend most of their time at work and with their families, and most people don't see their jobs or their work as part of the mission. They see it as a distraction to true ministry. I'm going to brag for a minute, and many of you already know this story, but my son, Nick, when he was several years ago, he's about 20 years old, and he's working as a cashier at Walmart. And a family came through. They were foster parents, and they had just picked up a baby. The baby was infant, brand new baby. The baby's crying because they've been taken from their home, and they're in a home they're in with a couple they don't even know, and the baby's crying, and they're trying to buy formula and diapers for this baby. Well, the formula this baby needed was a special kind of formula. If you're on Care Portal, you've seen needs like this, and so it's a special kind of formula. And Oklahoma DHS gives the foster parents a WIC card so that they can use that to pay for formula and diapers and necessary things. Well, for some reason, the WIC card wasn't working on this specific formula. And I'd love to say it's because of us. I hope it's because he heard my wife and I talk about exactly what we're talking about today. But my son reached into his back pocket and he pulled out his debit card, and without the mom seeing it, he swiped the debit card and he paid the $60 for the mom. Now, at 20 years old, I don't know about you, but $60 was a lot of money to him. But he knew that she needed help, and so he swiped the card, and he goes, "You're good, you can go." And the lady goes, No, you can't do that. And the interesting thing is, as that story was told over and over again, way more than probably it should have been told, but it was told over and over again, the one thing that made me most proud about my son is when people would ask him, "Nick, why'd you do that?" He said, "Because God told me to." Because he saw his work as something beyond just work, just a way to make money. He saw it as a way to move forward. J.R. Vassar goes on to say, when coworkers, I love this, when coworkers' lives fall apart, and they will search for someone with the scent of the sacred on them. Isn't that good? Listen, it gets better. And the leaven of the demonstration of the gospel opens the way for the light of the declaration of the gospel. Isn't that good? Let me say it again. The leaven, the fact that you demonstrate what Jesus looks like, what God looks like by your life and by your work, you earn the right then to declare who Jesus is to someone who may be very far from God. What an incredible role that we have to play. But let me share with you probably the biggest obstacle to this. It'd be easy to think that the obstacle to this is because we just don't want to do it, and I don't think that's it. I think sometimes it's hard, but I think the biggest obstacle to why we don't accept our role as an image bearer for God, the reason that maybe we don't let our work represent God the way that it needs to, is because somehow we have divided sacred from secular. Somehow we have taken the things that are of God and we've separated them from the things that we do Monday through Friday. We take roles like missionaries on the mission field. Even Todd's position as pastor of this church, my position as a pastor, Jay, any of the staff, Jared as campus pastor. We take roles of people who've been, quote, called into ministry, and we elevate them to this place and we turn them into heroes, which I'm not saying you shouldn't make them heroes, but in the same time, we then somehow make such a great divide that we diminish the role that you play every day when you go to work. And I think that's one of the biggest obstacles to us fulfilling this plan that God laid out on the first page of the Bible. Erwin McManus, another pastor, he's from California. It's a long quote, but this is good. You need to follow along. This is good. He says, we were created for work. Actually, what God did in that garden is He gave us responsibility. He told us to take stewardship over the planet, to have authority over His creation. Work isn't the result of the fall, of sin. Work being experienced without meaning and fulfillment is the result of the fall. And there's this deeper sub-narrative that is a problem. Not just that we don't have a good understanding or relationship to work and how God created us to work, but there is a strange, unspoken kind of statement that if you actually have a job, you're not living out the mission of Jesus. Really, the people that we admire, the people that we canonize, the people that we elevate as missionaries and the heroes of the faith are really the people actually that the people with jobs sponsor by giving their hard-earned money so that they can do something that the people working these other jobs don't have time to do or inclination. So we end up creating not a missionary, but a mercenary mentality where we pay people to do what we refuse to do. It's good, isn't it? It's hard. It's good. Listen, I said this in Norman. I'll say it again so it'll actually be on tape. I'll fight with Todd if he disagrees with me on this. Because I'm not saying that our role is not important. But I'm saying yours is equally as important. I'm not sure about this one. He can argue with me on this one. Maybe a little more. If I'm reading the Bible correctly, what God has called you to do at your work or at your school or at your home or at the store or wherever it is you're doing, what God has called you to do is the nuts and bolts of where the gospel moves forward in the world. My job is to work myself out of a job so that you will continue and I will join with you as a realtor or something else to do the work that God has called us to do. There is no distinction between the sacred and the secular. Erwin McManus goes on to say, we have come to believe that doing the everyday thing called life is somehow unspiritual. God created us to relate work to meaning. Don't look for meaning in your work. Bring meaning to your work. See, the problem is if we continue to divide the sacred from the secular, what we will do is we will spend our lives trying to build our kingdom or someone else's kingdom, not God's. We will be so busy building something. And this happens in work. It happens in government. And we spend so much time trying to build a kingdom that is not God's kingdom. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we're failing. The Bible is littered with stories of people who have failed trying to live out this mandate. Because we always get distracted and pushed over to building our kingdom instead of building His. It's probably not a surprise to you if you know me at all, but I'm a pretty big football fan. I love football. I love the game. I love watching it. I love watching the plays. I just love it. I love football, and I'm a really big OU football fan. Which, by the way, don't send me an email. There's a video that's going to play here in a minute. And yes, there's a Texas Longhorn sticker in the guy's back window. And I apologize right now. Okay? I'm a big football fan, big OU football fan. I'm a big Washington Warrior High School football fan. Westmore football. I'm a big football fan. I love football. And here's the interesting thing about football. Okay? Some of you that don't like football, you're going to go, why is he using that illustration? Well, hopefully you'll hang with me. All right. There are 3, maybe 3.5 groups of people that determine what happens on the field. Okay? There's 3 for sure. The half I'm going to call the cheerleaders. And I don't mean that bad. They do an incredible work. And if a guy's influenced by the fact that a girl's cheering for her and it makes him play better, that's great. Good for him. Cheer harder, girls. All right? But there's 3. You've got referees, you've got coaches, and you got players. All 3 of those groups of people determine the play that's on the field. Do you agree with me? You with me? Okay. All 3 of them do. Here's the interesting thing. The people we don't like the most, the referees, especially the Big 12 referee. I'm sorry, I digress. The referees, the reason we don't like them is because sometimes they try to insert themselves into the gameplay and try to make what they do more important than what's going on in the field. That's fine. But let's focus on the other two. You got coaches, you got players. I learned this when my kid was playing soccer growing up, actually basketball as well. I learned that coaches don't coach very much. Well, they don't coach at all if they're any good while the game is being played. Now football, it changes because in between plays and at halftime and all that, when they're on the sidelines or when you're talking, you can influence, the coaches can influence. But for the most part, the players determine every play what happens. Isn't it interesting then after a game like yesterday that you turn on the radio and all you hear is complaints about Jeff Lebby and his play calling? Now, see, you got quiet because some of you were those guys. Shame on you. All you heard was things about, the players either executed the plays or they didn't execute the plays. Period. End of sentence. And then you've got this interesting phenomenon that they're called spectators. And somehow spectators think, and I was one that was this way before, somehow spectators think that they have some influence on what happens on the field. You've sat next to these people, haven't you? Either you're in the stand, you're at home on TV, throwing things at it, you're listening on the radio. One time we had this guy that sat next to us at the games, 85,000 people in the stands, and this dude would stand up when the call was made that he didn't like, and he'd look up at the press box, like Josh Heupel or whoever was looking down going, I'm sorry, I'll do better next play. Come on. Somehow we think and my favorite, and I'm glad I'm better than I used to be, so I'll throw myself under the bus. My wife used to come in when I'm watching on TV. Hey, Nathan, they can't hear you. Right. There's one group of people that pretty much determine what happens on the field. It's players. So why in the church? See, the role that I've been called to at this season in my life is a coach. Why in the world do we leave all of the gameplay to the coaches? All the blame, all the credit. Oh, we play a role, they play a role. But you're the players. You're on the field. You determine if people hear the message of Jesus Christ at your workplace or wherever you're at. Church, we cannot let this continue the way it's continued. If we're going to move the gospel of Jesus forward, we have to respond in a way that says, I accept God's purpose for me. I'm an image bearer of God. I will find meaning in the work that God has for me. I will let my actions and my attitudes determine how I live, what I do, whether the kingdom moves forward. You were all created to be the image of God, to reign with God, to create through your work, to multiply and produce fruit for His kingdom. God's plan has always been to reign the world through you, to let you reign with Him. It's always been His plan. So who are you working for? So band comes back up. Let me read the scripture. And whatever you do, in word or in deed, do everything in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through Him.